Well, good morning and welcome to Cornerstone Baptist Church, and we're going to continue our study in the book of Mark today. Let me ask you first, how often do you hear the terms crisis or existential threat in a day? I guarantee you that if you hear that one of those terms or both at least once, if not multiple times a day. There are so many things happening in our country and in the world today that this is a crisis and that's a crisis, and existential threat, which means, a life-ending type of thing for all people. You hear that all the time. And there are many challenges or crises that our country is facing. There's a crisis at our southern border. There are crises of the pandemic that are worldwide. There are natural disasters, and there are mass shootings, and there is mistrust of political leaders and those in authority and government. There's all of these things, and it's kind of like balls being held up in the air. And what will it take for just one or all of them to drop? In fact, I don't know if you're like me, but sometimes you just want to shut the TV off. Just shut the radio off, and you don't want to hear it anymore, because it's just one crisis after another. That doesn't make them go away. It just you don't have to think about it. Where's it all going? And how do we fare in all of this? Things that we have so little control over. In fact, what control do we have over any of it? And yet it's there. Now following, we're going to be picking up in our study in Mark chapter 13, which is called the Olivet Discourse. And it's called that because Jesus delivered it on the Mount of Olives. That's why. And just preceding this, Jesus has, he's in Holy Week now. This is Wednesday before the cross. Cross is just a couple days before. And he has had one conflict after another with the religious and political leaders. The religious establishment has just bombarded him from all directions with all kinds of questions and trying to undermine what he's doing. And even though he gives them an answer, they don't really want to hear the answer. All they're looking for is a way to take him down. And in fact, Jesus says to his disciples, says to the people this words at the end of all these confrontations, and it's recorded in Matthew. It says, "Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those who sent you, how often I've longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you are not willing. Look, your house is left to you desolate. For I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." Those are the last public words that Jesus made when he left the temple, not to return again. Those words were in the minds of his disciples, I'm sure, when they came out of the temple. And have you ever been in a very tense situation and you just don't know what to say? I've been in those. I almost wonder if that's kind of how the disciples might have felt. Ooh, that was pretty hot. And so what they do is they draw Jesus' attention to the building. In fact, let me read to you the first few words of Mark chapter 13. It says, "As Jesus was leaving the temple, one of his disciples said to him, 'Look, teacher, what massive stones, what magnificent buildings.'" And it's true, the stones of the temple, Josephus, the Jewish historian, said that they were, some of them were 50 feet long, 24 feet high, and 16 feet deep. How in the world do they hew stones like that and get them there? That is an unbelievable feat. They're saying, Lord, look at these massive stones. What an incredible building. This was a building that Herod the Great had started building years before Jesus was born, and it wasn't completed until 64 AD. It was an absolutely beautiful edifice, and they drew his attention to it. Jesus said, "Do you see all these great buildings? Not one stone here will be left on another. Everyone will be thrown down. Whoa. Unbelievable. I wonder if Jesus' words listed right here, look, your house is left to you desolate, sprang to their mind. I mean, I wonder if they were thinking at that time, maybe he's talking spiritually. You're desolate, and but is he talking real honest? This is really going to happen? He literally means this house will be left desolate? What a shocking statement for him. What a crisis would have to transpire for those stones to move. And so as they left Jerusalem and they went onto the Mount of Olives, then four of the disciples, Peter, James, John, and Andrew, come to Jesus and said, man, tell us more about this, and when this is going to happen, and what's going to be the sign that these things are about to take place. Now, Matthew records a third question that Mark does not, and what is the sign of your coming? Because I'm sure that they were thinking in their mind, for sure, this means that events like this are not going to take place until the end. This is catastrophic. This is a crisis, an existential threat, and everything's going to be done. And surely Jesus will come back at that point. So I'm sure that was on their mind. So the disciples asked him these questions. And it's interesting that Jesus responds to them by not telling them immediately the answer to their question. But he gives them a couple warnings, a couple things to watch out for. That's starting down in verse 5. Let me read that to you. He said, verse 5, Jesus said to them, watch out that no one deceives you. Many will come in my name, claiming I am he, and will deceive many. When you hear of wars and rumors of wars, do not be alarmed. Such things must happen. But the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places and famines. These are the beginnings of birth pains. What he's saying is there's all of these things, these crises that you're going to face. These are not the signs of the end. Now, I'm sure that Christians back in the 1930s and 1940s thought this has got to be it. I'm sure they must have felt that way. I mean, the world was at war. The whole world, and millions of people were being killed. I mean, whole countries were gone. If any crisis was going to bring about the end, surely that will be it. But he said, no, those things have to happen. Now, for sure, those things are like birth pains. Like, what do they call them? Braxton Hicks? Those false labor, and I'm sure, ladies, you probably don't like that term, false labor. There's probably nothing false about it at all. But those kind of early warning signs that it's coming, but not yet. And that's what all of these things are. When there are charlatans abound, saying, I'm Jesus, and Matthew actually says, I am the Christ. Saying, I'm the one, come follow me, and wars and rumors of wars and natural disasters. When all of these things happen, that's not the sign. That is not it. Don't look to these things as the sign that the end is here. He then goes on, and he warns them that there's going to be persecution and strife for them as well. Down in verse 9, he says, you must be on your guard. You will be handed over to the local councils and flogged in the synagogues. On account of me, you will stand before governors and kings as witnesses, and the gospel must first be preached to all nations. Listen, hard times are going to come in your own life. Persecution and trials. When those things come, that's not the sign of the end. Now, you might feel absolutely overwhelmed. And these disciples here that he's spoken of literally were arrested, were beaten, had to stay in court for simply believing in Jesus. This would have meant an awful lot to Mark's original readers, who were Romans who were being persecuted for their faith. They would have said, oh, that's me. But that's not a sign of the end. When these things happen in your life, that's not a... Now again, these are birth pains. It's coming, but that's not the sign of the end. Now sometimes people have latched onto that verse, what is it, verse 10? Where it says, and the gospel must first be preached to all nations. Say, that's it. This is a way that we can somehow make Jesus come sooner. If we can just push the gospel, right? If we can just get Wycliffe just there to push the gospel out faster, then we can somehow hasten Jesus' coming. That's not what he's saying. He's not saying that we can somehow manipulate and force the system and force God's hand to come sooner. No, the gospel must continually go out. And by the way, think of it this way. Has the gospel gone out throughout America? Sure. You can turn on the radio and go through and you can hear the gospel in many different places. You can see it just written on billboards. It's there. There are millions of Bibles in homes all over. Christians are everywhere. Are there people there that are lost who do not know the Lord? There certainly are. The gospel has to keep going out to all the peoples. It has to keep going out through all of these things, through these trials and persecutions and wars and famines and earthquakes and natural disasters and personal trials and problems. All of these things, the gospel must keep going out. Keep going out. God uses these things to draw people to himself, as hard as that is. Sometimes, have you ever talked to a person who wants nothing to do with God, and then their marriage is falling apart, and they'll say, will you pray for me? I thought you didn't believe in God. In desperate times, people will turn to God. God uses these things. So in all of this, keep going. Keep serving him. Keep following him, and keep preaching the gospel through all of these things. This is not the end when these things happen in your life. So what is the sign then? He's told them all the things it's not. Now we come to down in verse 23, and we see what, verse 14. We see here is the sign, the first of two signs. This is when you see this is the sign. When you see the abomination that causes desolation, standing where it does not belong, let the readers understand. Then let those who are in Judah flee to the mountains. Let no one on the housetop go down or enter the house or take anything out. Let no one in the fields go back to get the cloak. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that this will not take place in winter, because those will be the days of distress unequaled from the beginning when God created the world until now, and never be equaled again. What is this abomination that brings desolation? In Daniel chapter 11 and 12, those terms, those specific words are used. This is a desolation, a desecrating of the temple. And I believe that this is talking about the Antichrist. This same thing is recorded in Revelation chapter 13, where the Antichrist will go into the temple and there will set up an idol to himself, causing people to worship him, worship a man in God's holy place. That is the abomination that causes desolation. The abomination that will bring about all the judgment and desolation that is yet to come. This type of thing had happened already in Israel's history. I think it was 597 BC, Nebuchadnezzar sacked Rome and plundered the temple and took all of its stuff, all of its wealth away. In 168 BC, Antiochus Epiphanes, who was a Greek, offered a pig on the altar of God to Zeus. In 70 AD, after the destruction of Jerusalem and the leveling of the temple, Titus set up a false idol in the temple complex. I'm sure the apostles remember this. If that's not an abomination, I don't know what is. All those things were precursors of what is yet to come. There's going to be yet another time when the Antichrist will set up an altar to himself, and it will cause people to call upon people to worship him. At that's the signal. That's it. When you see it, the end is coming, and it's coming fast. And the great tribulation that will follow that, the 3.5 years that will follow that, will be unparalleled in the history of the world. That's the first sign that he gives to his disciples. Then it comes down to verse 24, and he says this: "But in those days following that distress, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken." Some people see in there a nuclear holocaust. Whatever it is, it will be monumental. This is not only destruction on this earth, but even creation itself will it will become unhinged. At the end of this destruction brought on by the abomination of desolation. Verse 26, "At that time people will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory." That's the second sign. The first sign is the abomination that causes desolation, then the tribulation, and then Jesus is coming back. And that time, everybody's going to see him. Now, I put up the word there, parousia, and it's interesting. That word isn't used in Mark, but in the same passage here, in the same discourse in Matthew, this word is used. Remember I told you there were 3 questions the disciples asked? The third question is, what is going to be the sign of your coming? That's the word, that Greek word parousia is the word coming. And sometimes, theologians, you'll hear them use this word for the second coming. This is not the rapture, by the way. This is his second coming, when everyone will see him. That word parousia means presence after a time of absence. This is Jesus' presence on the earth after a time of absence. His going and his coming back. This is what he's talking about, this coming back. And Matthew also then records at that time, well, see what Mark says, and then I'll share with you what Matthew says. He says, verse 27, "And he will send his angels and gather his elect from the 4 winds of the earth and to the ends of the heaven." Matthew goes on and gives these parables of gathering all of his people. And what's going to happen at that time? The great throne judgment. Everybody's being gathered to be judged. This is a judgment that we will, praise the Lord, not have to go through. Those who are followers of Jesus will not have to go through this. This is the judgment for delivering punishment to all those. And remember, this is one where he's going to separate the sheep from the goats. And then he's going to turn to the goats, those who have rejected him, and punish them for eternity. This is the second sign. Notice what he says, what Mark says after this. Verse 28. "Now learn this lesson from the fig tree." Remember, he's used the fig tree before, so he's using this again as an illustration to them. "As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know that summer is near. So when you see these things happening, you know that it is near, right at the door. Truly I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass until these things have happened." What generation is he talking about? Again, this is one of those passages that people use to try to figure out, well, what is he talking about? I don't know, what events is he talking about? What generation? How long is a generation? And we try to use these to try to pinpoint when Jesus is coming. That's not his point. The generation that sees the abomination of desolation and the coming of Jesus, they will see the end. Those are the ones who will see the end. Well, what is that? So Jesus finally comes at the end of the chapter, and he says, verse 32, "But about that day and hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but the Father." He said, it's none of your business. Remember, they'll ask him this same question before. later on. They'll ask him after the resurrection. They'll say, Jesus, is this the time that you're going to restore your kingdom? He said, it's not for you to know. That's not your concern. What are you concerned with? He said, your concern is to do the will of God while you're here. Let God worry about that. Now, some folks get all tied up and saying, what do you mean that Jesus says, I don't know, only the Father knows? This speaks of his dual nature, his humanity and his deity. Jesus was both 100% human, 100% God. He chose to lay aside some of his divine attributes, such as his omniscience, knowing all things, and became human, just like us. He said, in my humanity, I don't even know when that day is. Does he know now? Sure he does. He knows now. But at that time, he did not know. Only God knows. So don't sweat it. God's got this. So then what are we supposed to do? Well, he goes on and says what we are supposed to do. Verse 33, be on your guard. Be alert. You do not know when that time will come. It's like a man going away. He leaves his house and puts his servants in charge, each with their own assigned task, and tells one at the door to keep watch. Therefore, keep watch, because you do not know when the owner of the house will come back, whether in the evening or midday, or when the rooster crows or at dawn. If he comes suddenly, do not let him find you sleeping. What I say to you, I say to everyone, watch. I saw this bumper sticker one time that said, Jesus is coming. Everybody look busy. You know, I think that it's just, if we knew when he was coming, would it change the way you act? If you knew he was coming this afternoon, well, first of all, maybe you wouldn't finish paying your taxes, or you wouldn't worry about, raking the lawn, or, it would change our behavior if we knew. He said, you don't need to know. You just do what you're supposed to be doing. Over and over again, he says on this, keep watch, be on guard, be ready. Constantly, over and over and over again, he tells his disciples to do this. This is what we're supposed to be doing. 5 times in these verses, he tells them to be vigilant, to be ready. So, are you vigilant? Matthew recounts the parable of the 10 virgins. Those who were called to wedding. They were the wedding attendants, the bridesmaids. That's what we would equate them to. But they weren't ready. And when the wedding was come, they weren't ready. Five of them weren't ready, and 5 of them were. He said, be ready, just like the bridegrooms. Here, Mark compares it to a landowner who's gone away, and he said, listen, I want you to take care of this. And Matthew, I believe, uses the idea of the talents. He says, you take this, and I want you to invest it while I'm gone and use this well, and I want you to do this. So what are you doing with the talents the Lord has given you? What are you doing with them? This is the time. Invest wisely. Use the talents and gifts that God has given you to accomplish his purposes, because you don't know when he's coming. How awful it will be for him to come and find us unprepared. How wonderful it will be for him to come catch you right in the act of serving him. Wouldn't you like that? For him to catch you in the act of serving him? That's what he's asking them to do. I've wondered in my own life, am I making a difference? I don't know if you've thought about that, but I'm rather insignificant. Am I making a difference? Does my existence even matter? Anybody? Am I making a difference in my family? What difference are you making in your family? How will your family remember you? You're making a difference in your church, in your community. What difference are you making? It can cause us to be filled with introspection and also fear. Fear of the future. That's not what Jesus wants us to do here. It's to not be filled with fear, but to trust. God's got this. He's in control. He's got the time frame. You're not in control of the natural disasters and all the things that are happening in this world. He is. So do your job. Do your thing. He's got this. If you haven't put your trust in Jesus, now's the time. Now's the time. Put your trust in Him and Him alone. You'll be glad you did. You really will. And if you have, then stop worrying about the future. Yeah, there are things that we can do, and there are things that we need to do. But don't worry about when Jesus is coming, what's going to happen. Oh no, what happens if North Korea launches ballistic missiles? Or, we have no control over that. God does. Do what you're supposed to be doing while we wait. I told one on, I woke up singing a hymn this morning, and the chorus goes like this. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in His wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of His glory and grace. Will you put your trust in Him? Father, I pray that You'll help us to trust You, knowing that You are in control, that You will come. But while we wait, Lord, help us to follow You with all of our hearts. In Jesus' name.